So Geert, we have talked about this topic before, but this war on talent.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this industry where we now say every company is an IT company. So everybody looks for the same type of people, the same talent. And one of the things that is of course very interesting is how to attract and retain talent, but that's maybe for another time. What is more interesting maybe is how do you actually ensure that the people that you hire first have the right skills?
Yeah.
And how do you bring them up to speed? And more importantly, how do you keep them up to speed? I think that that's a hard topic to crack.
Yeah, and I think really the organizations that really have turned themselves into good learning organizations are far more successful than companies who do not invest in learning and advancement of their engineers. So I think it's a good topic for a new episode.
So let's dive into how to make a learning company.
Yep, welcome to the Lead Podcast.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So I like the idea to how become a learning company. How to come into attraction where you keep on evolving your employees, how to keep your skills up to date. So, but let's first start a little bit on. So why do we actually need to do that as a company if we have a product that is very successful?
Yeah, I think it's multiple things, right? So we already had an episode where we talked about technical depth and such kind of things. I think when you have an engineering force building your solution, when they only know a certain trick, well, over the years, you will get taken over by other companies who are moving faster, better, and cheaper than you because they use new technology.
Yeah, but I see a lot of examples where companies actually have a stack. They have a product. That product has evolved over time, but basically it's still the same product. So they have this big monolithic code base. And big technical depth. So what has technical depth maybe? What has that to do with retaining your talent?
Yeah, I think it's a vicious cycle, right? So if you have old tech or code that you need to work on, and there's a lot of technical depth, so it's really hard to make changes. It's also less fun to work on, right? And if there are several other companies in your neighborhood who are working on far more modern stuff, it might be that your engineers actually start looking at the neighbors and see that the grass is actually greener there and make the jump to your competition because they are using more fresh and new technology that people want to do. Learning is something that most engineers enjoy doing.
Yeah, I think it is actually quite a good dimension that you add here. If you talk about technical depth, where we usually look at, I don't know, quality decline, cost increase, speed decline, that it is maybe an extra dimension on talent decline. If people do not like your technology anymore, regardless if it still works. Yeah. If they don't like to work with that old stuff or the technology in itself, it is maybe even a risk. So another good reason to actually embrace change and fight the technical debt that you have.
Yeah, I talked to companies and they had some parts of their application stack which was really old, hasn't been touched in years, and people are on one side afraid of touching it, and if you wait too long, it's becoming harder and harder to actually move that to newer technology.
Yeah, so I think that we can conclude that we just need to invest in our technology stack, not only because of the technology stack itself, but also on our talent. So our industry really needs actually learning companies that really see how can we still engage the people that we hire and have in the company already.
Yeah, you see a lot of disruption by companies who actually have mastered this trick compared to more traditional companies who have not invested in this, and they just get passed by these companies, right? But what I hear mostly when talking to people in these companies are like, yeah, it sounds nice that everyone should learn new stuff, but we also have a business to run. We don't have time to actually do this learning. We don't have time to send everyone to training. We don't have the budget to that. That's their problem, right? Or they have a couple of days where everyone can do a certain training or something, but that's very, very limited.
Yeah, because what I hear is, I also hear of these companies that mastered the trick, but they spend enormous amount of time, as it seems, and money into learning, all kinds of different learning, and maybe we can dive a little bit further into what they actually doing. But the companies that I see, well, they have a very limited study budget. They follow training, so you can go to a course once a year or once every 2 years for a few days, and not too far away, so it needs to be local. And also not too many days, because it's time, and the time it can be better spent on building features. So while the gap seems very big from companies that invest a lot to more the normal companies that say, well, this is the limited amount of time that you have for study and training.
Yeah, but I think with that vision, we're looking at too focused on actual formal training and formal learning experience where people go into a class, etc. If you look at the engineering population, there's often a lot of different experience levels in there as well. So junior people could learn from experienced people on the job. There's this 70-20-10 model regarding learning, where they say, well, actually, when people learn stuff, 70% of the stuff they learn is actually happening by experience on the job, actually experiencing, implementing things, doing things, instead of learning things from books. So actually on the job, doing things yourself, that's 70%. Then 20% comes from peers sharing knowledge within your company, from your own colleagues, etc. And then only 10% comes from formal training. You have, and formal training is really something that costs extra time and a certain budget. But that the 70 or 80%, the 90% we're actually talking about here, is something that you, in your operating model of how you actually work with your engineers, how they can learn from each other, how they communicate together, etc. That's where the most gain can be done.
Yeah, so I think that makes sense. We are, of course, working in a consultancy firm, and one of the things that we always say to our salespeople is, please find an assignment for more than one person, more than two persons, and also find a assignment that really fits the learning journey and the dreaming learning journey, or like where do you want to go in a few years of the consultant in question. So that we say, okay, we combine experienced people with not so experienced people. We look at the talent journey and the growing journey, and then we do work at customers to also learn on the job from each other, with each other, to make both the customer and us a little bit better. So I think it makes sense, but it's also a true engagement of not only the learning and development department, but also of sales and other departments within the organization that actually need to shape the assignments or the product that you are building, to also spend time making time to actually spend that on assignments. Maybe it's not so fast as you would expect with only experienced people.
Yeah, but that's also, that goes for most engineering organizations. Like, people are in a certain team, and you need to make sure that these teams are set up in such a way that there's experienced people in those teams and less experienced people, so they can learn from each other, and people actually work on the stuff that they really like to do. And that might change over time. Even if someone was working in value stream A for a long time, it could be that he got bored of that and wants to move to value stream B because that sparks new interests. And the nice thing, if you actually let these people move to stuff they like, well, they will stay at your company longer because they have more fun at working. But they can also bring that knowledge from that other team to the other team.
Now, so what would be a good way to really ingrain this in the DNA of your company? Because of course, you can just put people less experienced people on the same assignment or in the same team or in the same value stream, whatever you are doing. But do we need to do more formal things? Are there like things that we can really do here?
There's this model by David Kolb called the experiential learning model, and what he says, it mimics the 70-20-10 model, right? So it starts off with doing stuff, getting experience in stuff, after that reflecting on stuff, learning from your reflections, and in the end being able to do experiments, and doing that in a cycle. From those experiments you get experience again. So how do you do these kind of things in a team? Should you do that alone? And I think from there on, if you really want to learn from others on the job, things like pair programming are really key things that you need to take into account. I think the companies that I've worked at that did pair programming, the skill level and the experience level grows a lot faster compared to companies who did not do that.
Well, on the other hand, you hear a lot of things when it comes to pair programming or mob programming, where companies say or managers say, well, now we have actually 2 or more people doing the same task. That is an expensive job then. So how do you see that?
Yeah, that's the most common heard thing about pair programming, right? So I could have one person implement this thing, or I could have 2 people working on the same thing. Will they get it done in 50% of the time? Well, probably for the first iteration, it will not take 50% of the time. It will take a bit longer. So there is an investment, but you get a lot of stuff in return as well, right? You have to think about sharing the knowledge of the things that you implement. That's where this whole episode is about. We're talking about learning, experiences, getting stuff, learning from others, etc. So what I was thinking, if you work together with maybe a more junior person with an experienced person, they learn from each other, and it's easier to ask questions if you're pair programming instead of doing asynchronous reviews, for example, where you work on something alone for a day and then you create a pull request, you ask for formal feedback.
It's a great knowledge sharing mechanism, right? It's not only that you do the same work, but you actually share your knowledge while doing. And someone can ask questions like, why did you implement this like this? And they, this is the normal way how we do this in this company, or this is the industry standard, or I have used this 20 methods before and that doesn't work as well as is described. And I think that it is also not only a technical sharing knowledge, but I think it's what I think also very important. Also social skills that you can really train by doing this pair programming thing, right? That you have a conversation in a good way.
I think it is good that technical people who are not often skilled at these kind of things, it's also good for them to train these kind of things. Having conversations, technical conversations, that's probably the conversations that these people like to have the most, right? Just having conversations with peers on certain topics. So in the end, it is also more fun, working with someone and actually solving a problem. Because what you often see is if you work asynchronously, you create a pull request and you ask for a review, then you get more of a formal review, and all the feedback that comes in then sounds like an attack to a lot of people, right? Oh, you should have done this, you should have done that.
Exactly.
But if you do that while pair programming, like, why are you doing this? Then it does not feel like an attack. You're just asking a question.
But on the other hand, if it does feel like an attack, then I think it's also very interesting to have the conversation later on okay, this is also something that you or me needs to work on. Like I give you feedback or ask a question. What is it? Why do you respond? And I think that when we talk about learning, I think the social aspects, the soft skill learning is maybe even more important in the end than all the technical aspects. And I think it's a great way to actually do that in the MOP or the pair programming. But I want to take one step back, because you mentioned the David Kolb model.
This was the doing experience is something that you can get while doing pair programming, right?
Yeah.
That's getting experience without you having that experience per se, but the first part is just doing stuff. That's where pair programming can come in.
And then the second step you mentioned, and the third was reflecting and learning from that reflection. Yeah. So what would be nice ways to do that?
Yeah, so I think we were already moving to the reflection part of either doing pull requests and responding to feedback, etc. So that's one thing. On the other hand, looking at reflection, it's also looking at creating the right safety to make mistakes. We already mentioned, like, do you feel attacked when someone gives you feedback, or what happens when you make a mistake? Having the right psychological safety is key here. So, when you're making mistakes in a pull request, etc., that does not lead into any fallout or actually things breaking, because you're not actually deploying stuff to production. But it might happen that you, even if you're doing pair programming, etc., that mistakes are made that actually end up in production. And how we reflect on that is also key. There's a lot of companies that have this culture of, you're the hero if you solve problems. We talked about that in a previous episode as well, the hero culture. But also not blaming people for making mistakes is also really key.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think as leadership of a company, you really need to pay attention to that. So not only do we have the right training program, or do we have the right courses, or do we have enough budget or whatever, or time to actually do pair programming, but when something is not the way it should be, how do you respond? I've once been in a company where I did some consultancy job, very small consultancy job, and then the whole day I was explaining on how we could do stuff and how we could do it better and how to improve and how to make everybody part of this whole exercise, and everybody was like, yeah, we are going to do it, and it was very short, so we started doing it at around 3 o'clock. The manager was part of this whole conversation and it was very, very happy. And then at 3:30 or something, an incident hit, so some fallout at a customer. And he came in and he said, okay, we are stopping with everything everything that we discussed, this is not going to work. So now everybody back to work. So I thought, okay, well, everything that has been built up, before I came, it was like gone in a second. Everybody was like, okay, I'm never going to learn. I'm never going to do anything. I'm never going to be able to make a mistake here. Because of the behavior also of the leadership. So I think really, really important to build that culture of safety when it also comes to learning.
Yeah, and I think what I love to see as well is like, even if mistakes are made, like see those as a learning opportunity. Do things like blameless postmortems, doing things where you're in the open, admit, well, okay, we made a mistake. Not this person made a mistake. No, we as an organization made a mistake. There was a certain issue. We're looking into what happened, or if it's actually a post-mortem, looking afterward, after the fact, but we found out what the issue was. We took these kind of measures, so in the future it will not happen again. That also builds trust.
Yeah.
If you're in the open about the things that go wrong, then people know, oh, these people actually do know, well, how to run their stuff, but well, in every situation something can happen, right? That you didn't expect. So
of course,
always try to get back to the why did this happen, instead of this person pushed stuff to production immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let's take one step back. How is it possible that this person could push this to production without a review?
Exactly. What information did he miss or she miss? What do we need to do next time to make this not happen?
Yeah, instead of
focusing on the process and not on the person.
And really getting to the initial why. They often say do the 5 whys. I go back. So why did this step happen? Oh, so why does this step happen?
Yeah.
Really get back to the root cause of how this could actually happen and try to improve that.
So back to this 70-20-10 model that you started with. You said, okay, 70% of the learning is been done on the job.
Yeah.
We mentioned a little bit of the stuff that you can do. I think that one of the things that pops into mind as well is that I think that in this whole learning on the job, I think it's also good to have some kind of a process in place where you start documenting all the stuff that you do, creating playbooks of, your incident response or how you approach the different problem, and then bring that back into your abstraction of learning again.
Yeah, you can use these kind of things. If you have these playbooks or runbooks on how to solve certain incidents, give this to an inexperienced person, and maybe with someone watching behind his back to actually see if everything is going wrong. But give such an inexperienced person the ability to solve these problems with existing runbooks. This, on one hand, it gives experience to this inexperienced person, but it also improves your runbooks or playbooks on how to solve these issues. Because if they run into, I'm stuck, I cannot solve this problem, it means that your runbook was not complete enough.
Yeah, right? Not sufficient. No, I think, and that's a nice segue into that second step that you mentioned. The 70% is learning on the job, and the 20% is learning from your peers. I think that knowledge sharing in other ways than pair programming or mob programming or really on the job, I think that you as a company also need to facilitate sessions or material where people can also learn from each other outside of the real job that they are currently doing. And there's two things, right? Doing formal training, we actually have a full day and do a certain course or thing, but doing some internal event where you learn something, maybe just have an evening where you share knowledge internally about things that people learned or new stuff that they build. Yeah, going through that runbook that you just created about that incident. Those kind of things can really improve your organization as well. Think about things like doing
open source internally within your company, inner sourcing for stuff, and explaining how stuff is working so people can actually help contribute to that. If you have certain central components or platforms or tools that you want to use, share that knowledge so people can actually contribute to it.
And make that findable. I think that
that's
a
often
long time back we had a nice episode also with Lego, where they talked about their internal developer platform. Where one of the main things was also make things findable. Who is working on what? Where can I find documentation? Where can I find this API? How can I contribute when something is not working?
Especially in larger scale organizations,
yes.
This is really key. Either have it really organized so a certain value stream has everything they need, or if there are dependencies with others that you do not know directly, make sure that all that stuff is really findable. Looking at most intranet or wikis or platforms that people build for this, they're actually pretty bad, right? So tools like Backstage and such have a really big hype, and there is value in it if you do it in the right way. I like this quote that I read somewhere, like, Backstage is like a pane of glass, right? But if you put a pane of glass over a piece of shit, you still see a piece of shit, right? So if your internal documentation, etc., is just rubbish, you can grab it all together in one pane of glass, but it's not going to help you, right?
No, definitely true. I think it works both ways. It can also be a driver to first make the piece of shit visible, and then start working on to make it better. But I totally agree. It's not a solution to implement a tool like that. It is a solution to start working on making things visible and start sharing the knowledge that you have in your organization. Then I think in that 70-20-10 model that we had, like the 20 was more how to learn from peers. And then basically there is only the 10% where we started with, like, training is expensive, we don't have a lot of budget. But actually in this model, only 10% of this whole learning organization is formal training, right?
Yeah. But in the end, you do need some way of formal training as well.
Yes.
Right? So if you really want to learn completely new things that are not known within the organization, you can expect from engineers that they like to learn stuff in their free time, etc. But I don't think that's the right expectation to set.
No.
And as said, it is also a thing that people might take into account when deciding where to work. If your company does invest in training, or you get a training budget, etc., that might be one of the factors that people look for when searching for.
I think it also can really contribute to the psychological safety. We are helping a lot of companies with building, for example, a CCOE or a cloud center of excellence or something like that. And what I see a lot is that, we get, of course, people from internal people joining the team. They don't have a lot of knowledge, or basically no knowledge at all, but they are just thrown in the deep. And there is no room, no time, no budget for real training. So they are swimming around, really trying to keep up with the pace, really trying to do their best, but it's just not working because they missed the complete basic level of knowledge. And then after we train them, almost always after half a year of swimming, the customer says, maybe we should spend some time and effort in training them to a basic level of knowledge. They exponentially grow because they just have a foundation to start building upon.
Yeah, sometimes a theoretical base is needed, right?
You need to have some base.
I don't want to start the whole discussion about do you need an engineering degree or anything to work in IT, right? That's a whole different discussion. But sometimes having a base knowledge of why things happen or why things exist or
just basic terminology. This is what we mean by this. This is what we mean by this. This is the industry standard of how things are working right now. And I think there is no engineering degree needed. It's just basic knowledge of the stuff that you are going to work on.
But I still see a lot of companies also focusing on that degree, and of course that might be a certain check that you want to do, but in the end, again here we're talking about on-the-job experience, etc., which is far more important than that formal training. And I think a degree also looks at is a part of formal training. So what we haven't touched when we were talking about learning from your peers, etc., is also learning stuff on a personal level. When we're talking about learning today, we're focusing a lot on tech skills and pair programming and learning technical skills with technical depth, etc. But there's also a side of actual personal development that's also really key. Also, when you want to change your culture a bit into this growth mindset, psychological safety, etc. I think you will also need to do some form of training or knowledge sharing around that topic.
Yeah, I think what really helps there is to, and I think, believe it or not, a lot of people or companies do not have it. I think it starts with defining what do we find important as a company. Mm-hmm. So, for example, what we did is we defined 8 behaviors that we think are important for our consultants. This is what we want to see at our customers. And we shaped them a little bit. We gave them some examples so that people know, okay, this is what is meant by this behavior. For example, curiosity. That means you should ask questions. You do not judge too soon, too often. And then from there, if everybody has that same frame of reference of what kind of behavior do we want to see, what kind of behavior do we find important, you can also start building training. Like there is a communication training, or there is a listening training, or there is some other personal development training. And you can also have reflection with each other. Like, oh, I see you react in a certain way. Maybe that is not the way you should react when you look at this, what we strive for. So it really starts in what do we want to see as a company, and that is not always clear.
No, but it's also really key that leadership in this takes a prominent role in showing this behavior to others, right? Yes. And that starts where we already talked about making mistakes, etc. That psychological safety, it starts with that leadership really enables this in their people, but also showing the people skills that you expect from your employees. That the leadership also shows this, because people work for people, right? You work at a company because you like working with those people for your manager. Yeah. Most people do not quit their jobs; they quit their manager, right?
Exactly. I think this is a great summary of how it works, right? You can do everything what you want in terms of learning journeys, or personal development, or whatever. But in the end, it is about people. Yeah. And I think that if you really have trust in the people itself and build a learning journey for every individual, I think that is the key to success for every company.
Yeah, but I think it starts with actually giving people the room to develop themselves, to grow themselves, actually giving them a journey for a longer time. That is really the thing to aim for.
I think that we covered a lot of ground again.
Yeah.
So I hope that you find it useful. If you have any comments or remarks or any hints or tips that you can give us where we can learn from, we would really appreciate it if you can share it with us. Yeah. And for now, thanks for listening.
Yeah, hope you listen again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.